We think of the United States as a nation born out of an anti-colonial revolution, right? But what happens when that very nation becomes a colonial power itself? Well, today we're diving into that exact moment, a forgotten but absolutely pivotal chapter in history, the U.S. occupation of the Philippines. And that really is the central question, isn't it? How on earth did a country founded on the ideals of liberty and self-governance end up fighting a brutal war to conquer another? Well, the whole story kicks off with an explosion that would literally change the course of American history. So this right here is the USS Maine. In February of 1898, it's docked in Havana, Cuba, and suddenly, boom, it explodes and sinks. Over 200 American sailors die. Almost overnight, the rallying cry, "Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain," just sweeps across the U.S., pushing the nation straight into a war with the Spanish Empire and setting off a chain reaction that would be felt halfway around the globe. Now you have to remember, unlike the big European powers of the day, the US really didn't have a history of overseas colonialism. It was kind of becoming an empire by accident, or so it seemed at first. And that's what made its next move so shocking. Man, 1898 was a whirlwind. The Maine explodes in February. By May 1st, the US Navy has completely crushed the Spanish fleet way over in the Philippines at the Battle of Manila Bay. But look closely at this timeline. Right here, June 12th, the Philippines declares its independence. They really believed they had found a powerful friend in America. They had no idea how wrong they were. Yeah, before the U.S. put on the hat of a conqueror, it was actually seen as a liberator. For this one brief, shining moment, American forces and Filipino revolutionaries were on the same side, united against a common enemy, the crumbling Spanish colonial government. See, the Filipinos, led by this brilliant guy, Emilio Aguinaldo, were already deep in their own revolution against Spain. So when the U.S. shows up, Aguinaldo sees a powerful ally, and American commanders actually worked with him. Together, their forces backed the Spanish into a corner in Manila. And with victory so close, Aguinaldo did what any revolutionary leader would do. He declared the Philippines a free and independent republic. But that dream of an independent republic, a dream they thought was being built in partnership with the United States, well, it was about to be completely shattered. This is where the story takes a really dark turn. So instead of storming Manila side by side with their Filipino allies, the Americans cut a secret deal with the Spanish. They literally staged a mock battle, just for show, to make sure that when the city finally fell, it would fall to the Americans and to the Americans alone. Aguinaldo's revolutionary army was physically blocked, stopped from entering the very capital city they had just fought and bled to liberate. And then the betrayal was made official. In December 1898, the Treaty of Paris formally ends the war between Spain and the U.S. And just like that, with these few cold words in Article 3, the Philippines, a nation of millions of people with its own declared government, was just handed over from one colonial master to another. And the price tag for this new American colony? $20 million. That's it. An entire nation sold like a piece of property. The Filipino people, who had just fought for their freedom, were never even brought to the table. They weren't even consulted. So how does a nation like the United States, born from its own anti-colonial struggle, justify doing something like this? Well, the answer lies in a really powerful, long-standing American idea. Manifest destiny. You've probably heard the term. It was this core belief that the U.S. had a divine, almost sacred mission to expand westward across North America. It's the ideology that pushed the country from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific. But now, for the first time, that idea was about to cross an ocean. These paintings, they just perfectly captured the mindset. They paint westward expansion as this noble, civilizing quest. I mean, you can see the settlers bringing light and progress, pushing back the darkness. This exact same logic was now pulled out and repurposed to justify taking control of the Philippines. And here it is, straight from the horse's mouth. President McKinley himself framed the whole thing not as a conquest, but as a moral, even religious duty. They called this policy benevolent assimilation, the idea that American rule was actually for the Filipinos' own good. The problem was, this benevolent mission was about to be enforced by the barrel of a gun. The Filipinos hadn't fought a revolution just to trade one colonial master for another. A new and, frankly, much bloodier war was pretty much inevitable. And back in the States, a really powerful wave of dissent started to rise up, challenging the country's new imperial dreams. Just look at this photo. This is the brutal reality behind all that lofty talk. This was the real human cost of uplifting and civilizing a people who already considered themselves free. The promise of benevolence just dissolved into the violence of subjugation. The breaking point came on February 4th, 1899. By now, American and Filipino armies were in this incredibly tense standoff around Manila. An American sentry fired on a Filipino soldier crossing a bridge. And that one shot, that single shot, ignited a brutal 3-year war. And this war created a deep, deep rift back home. On one side, you had the government pushing this idea of benevolent control, but on the other, you had the very powerful anti-imperialist league. We're talking big names like Mark Twain and Andrew Carnegie, arguing that by colonizing another nation, America was betraying its own soul, the very principles of the Declaration of Independence. So, what was the final cost of America's experiment with destiny? For the Filipino people, the answer is just tragic. After years of vicious guerrilla warfare, Emilio Aguinaldo was finally captured in 1901. His proclamation of surrender is just heartbreaking to read. You can feel the exhaustion, the weight of defeat, the resignation to what he called an irresistible force. The dream of the First Philippine Republic. It was over. So we end up right back where we started. The Philippine-American War was a massive crossroads, a moment where the U.S. chose empire over liberation. And looking back at this forgotten war isn't just about a history lesson. It's about asking what those founding American ideals of liberty and self-determination really mean, both back then and maybe even more importantly, now.